Middle school years are difficult for all students to navigate, but are often more difficult for students who are deaf or hard of hearing. Also, as mentioned in the introduction, students who are deaf or hard of hearing will be referred to as students, unless otherwise noted when compared to those who are hearing. In order to make healthy connections in school and life, students need to learn how to get along with others, exercise good judgment, and manage their emotions. Social skills also include interpersonal life skills that progress through childhood into adolescence and adulthood. Middle school years are particularly challenging as students evolve their social connections from physical play to more complex and sophisticated language in a wider variety of social situations. Middle school is a critical time for development of self-identity and social relationships for all students. Students have the added challenge of navigating a world with limited access to communication. They may struggle with making connections and the social aspects of friendships with many different peers. It is important to remember that each student is an individual, but many students share common experiences and challenges. However, it is not always a positive experience, as Jessalyn shares next.
As a deaf girl who went to school with 15 other kids who were deaf and hard of hearing, only 3 other kids were my age. 2 of them were girls, and I became friends with them. These 2 girls and I would take the same bus home as we all traveled 30 minutes each way to go to school. Every other day, the girls would decide if they would be my friend or not. And the bullying in this small group was intense and horrific. It lasted almost 4.5 years. Part of what the teachers did was to try to continue to fix our friendship by demanding that the girls be nice to me. This did not help the situation. What was needed was more social language. Instead, the teachers should have not only shared this information with my parents, who were clueless about the bullying, but also should have taught me to advocate for myself by giving me words to say and encouraging me to find better friends. This took a huge social emotional toll on me.
It is important for teachers to recognize the social struggles and provide students with the social language supports needed to develop and foster friendships. When considering social-emotional goals for IEPs, friendship is a very important topic to teach to middle school-aged students because of the nuances of friendship levels and the language involved. There are approximately 4 levels of friendships that students need to learn about in order to understand the social dynamics of middle school. The first level of friendships might be when students share a friendly greeting in the hallway, which is called an acquaintance. It is important for students to be aware that other students may greet them in the hall, and the social norm would be to respond with hi, a smile, or a head nod. It is also important for students to recognize that these students are not necessarily good friends.
An 8th grade student who is hard of hearing and has other disabilities desperately wanted to fit in with her peers, but does not have the full access when others are chatting and relies on what she can see other girls are doing. The student thinks that other students are friends with her when they wave and smile at her, and the student has said, "That is my good friend, because she smiles at me and waves to me every morning in the hallway." In another situation, the same student sees a group of girls that she really wants to be friends with, and then sees them doing jumper cables on each other, laughing hysterically about it as a group. Jumper cables are when someone pokes another person on the side and then that person jumps. It is implied that there is a level of close friendship and allows them to touch each other like that. Not understanding levels of friendship, the student jumped in among the group of girls and started doing jumper cables on one of the girls. The girls were startled and looked at her at first with shock and then discomfort. Smiles were fake and uncomfortable. They were unsure of how to respond to the student. The student laughs at them, thinking they were going to accept her and attempt to join the group with jumper cables, but she's unaware of the social norms. An interpreter observes the situation and tries to provide social coaching to the student. However, the student says that the girls are her good friends because they smile and they say hello each morning. She does not know their names. Understanding levels of friendship needs to be taught directly since some students rely only on vision and what they observe.
Acquaintances might also be students who work together in groups or sit near each other in class. Acquaintance relationships can be confusing for students, especially those in younger middle school years when they transition from elementary school with more physical play on the playground to the expectation of developing deeper friendships. Teachers can offer descriptions of different levels of friendship so that students understand what they mean and learn who they can trust with what information.
Casual friendships are the second level, which is when students start having basic conversation and maybe ask for help with homework or ask to be a partner on a group project. The third level of friendship is close friends, which occurs when students explore shared family and their own values, mutual interests, and feel safe to share personal information. Students usually hang out together outside of school and participate in similar activities or clubs. They may do an activity around the community together. Finally, there are bonded or intimate friendships. These are usually limited to one or two friends and include strong support for each other, mutual respect, and honesty with each other. Frequently, these friends spend quite a bit of time together and talk or share lots of ideas and thoughts and deep conversations. Students may struggle with the social language and skills needed to invite peers to do activities together and then to maintain ongoing conversations. Clear, detailed instruction about levels of friendship as well as how to develop friendships clears up some of that confusion that's caused because students do not overhear other people's conversations. Role-playing is an effective strategy to learn how to ask someone to hang out or asking someone to be your friend. This gives students words and practice in a safe place with an adult who knows them. For example, changing the words, "Do you want to play together?" to "Do you want to hang out?" is something that may need to be taught in a role-playing situation, especially in the early middle school years. For students who have a cued language transliterator or a sign language interpreter, there are some additional social challenges. Having an adult helping to provide access to information between middle school students may cause awkward feelings that were not there before. Having this transliterator or interpreter may also deter hearing students from initiating social conversations with students in other settings.
In 6th grade, I attended a public middle school for only 1 year. I did have cued language transliterators, CLTs, and ASL interpreters who switched regularly, as well as special education services. But I was very isolated in 6th grade and didn't socialize much. I had a couple of friends I spent time with occasionally, but otherwise I kept to myself most of the time. In addition, I struggled with the nuances in the academic curriculum I was learning. For example, one time in social studies class, we were watching an educational movie about a Native American tribe somewhere. A reoccurring scene in that movie was that, one at a time, girls would be taken into a room by an older man, and the door was closed behind them. I kept asking the teacher what this meant, but even his answers didn't make sense to me. It turned out it was rape. This is an example of inferential information that other kids may have understood and talked about during the movie, but I missed. Even though I had ASL interpreters, CLTs, and special education services during the 6th grade, I started getting frustrated that I needed them. I didn't want to be the one that needed help all the time, and I didn't want to have interpreters or CLTs in my classes with me. I wanted to be self-sufficient and independent. Because I was the only deaf student in the entire school, I stood out because there were always staff with me.
Jamie's feelings are common for middle school age students who use an interpreter or transliterator services to access academic and social information. However, even when he was able to understand what was being said during a movie through captions, he missed some of the nuances and incidental social information, even though it was not good. It's also important that middle school age students learn to interpret the social context and change their social behavior based on the interpretation. One way that teachers could model conversations, both appropriate and inappropriate, could be shown through videos and with closed captions. Another option would be to discuss the point of view of a character from a story. It's important that teachers and parents remember that hearing students have constant access to a wide variety of conversation, both in structured situations in the classroom as well as unstructured situations in the lunchroom or in social events. Therefore, students who are deaf or hard of hearing need visually accessible examples and practice making conversation through videos, role play, and other strategies. Jamie shares how having online school affected him socially. It's important to remember friend connections through technology cannot completely replace in-person communication and interactions.
For part of 7th grade, my mom homeschooled me. Then for the latter half of 7th grade, I went to an online school that I attended until 10th grade. At this online school, I did not need any ASL interpreters or CLTs because all instruction and classes were online. Though the teachers spoke over a microphone, I was able to understand most of the time because they were in quiet areas. Attending this online school might have been one of the better parts of my educational experience, except that it really hindered my social experience. It was an online school, so I did not get daily or even weekly in-person interactions with my peers. All classes and meetings took place online through Blackboard, but I only saw my peers in person once a month or once every 2 to 3 months. While developing connections with peers online was beneficial in that all communication was typed, it was difficult not having daily in-person socialization.
With Jamie's online experience, he was able to experience more success with typed communication, but not able to develop friendships or make social connections. Teachers and parents need to consider the development of these skills when making placement decisions for students. It is also important to consider students' personalities when thinking about social skills and assertiveness. Some students may be quieter and prefer to work independently, while other students may be more outgoing and want to have increased social friendships. In addition, if students have had some negative experiences, they might be shy. The definition of being shy is being reserved or having or showing nervousness or timidity in the company of other people. Teachers can discuss with students what their social goals are for middle school. This can be done using the self-determination model of learning, which asks students to choose a social goal and make an action plan. Then teachers can provide some educational supports to help students meet goals and then adjust as needed. Goals might include getting to know 1 or 2 people on a sports team or in a club. It might also mean asking someone to hang out at their house. With this goal setting, teachers need to consider the personality of the student when helping them to set goals. Even though students might join extracurricular activities and meet social goals, sometimes during the school day, a listening break is needed, and not necessarily to avoid talking with other students, as Anne shares next.
When I was in school, I was a solitaire, the only deaf student in my small town. Since I was the only one, and also didn't have a teacher of the deaf or hard of hearing from 2nd grade through graduation, I learned social skills through my siblings and then by taking some risks. My parents encouraged me to be in extracurricular activities, and I was active on the newspaper as an editor, yearbook staff, cheerleading, where I could yell as loud as I wanted to, and FHA. I advocated on the cheerleading team to have people slow down the cheers until I had them memorized. Anyway, in school I often did not talk with other kids during lunch. It was and still is too noisy for me to understand people talking. So I developed a pattern of reading while eating. I'm somewhat of a quieter person, but I really do like being around other people. Reading gives the message that I'm busy, and if someone wants to talk with me, then they know that they need to approach me and tap my shoulder. This wasn't avoidance, as some teachers may have thought, but it was rather a way to give myself a listening break and to feel safe. Therefore, it's important for teachers to consider the personality of the students and perhaps ask if they're doing or why they're doing what they do. For me, it was survival and energy conservation to read during lunch. Without the break, anxiety creeps up because the energy drain of having to continually listen, especially when it's noisy and I'm trying to fit in. I still take breaks as a professional to this day. Sometimes I find it's a lot of emotional and mental work to figure out what to say.
Oftentimes in middle school, students begin to feel social pressures and feel embarrassed about not having access to social information in classrooms, as well as during less structured situations, such as lunchtime. They might also discontinue the use of their hearing assistive technology or seem to ignore the interpreter in order to feel as if they fit in. As I relate in my next story, going along with the crowd is sometimes an embarrassing lesson to learn, especially when situations are not accurately reflective of the student. At the end of middle school, some friends and I walked out of the school before the final bell rang. Someone in the friend group forgot something back in the school, so we all walked back into the building. But we got caught by a bouncer and were taken to the office. The administrator talked with us, but I didn't understand what was being said and copied the friends' facial expressions and just shrugged my shoulders. I didn't realize she had made a nasty comment, and so my expressions were interpreted as defiance, and I was sentenced to in-school detention the next day. I was ashamed and embarrassed, and my parents made me go through with the punishment. After that, I was more careful, but withdrew a bit, keeping to myself to avoid getting in trouble. I realized there was more to friendships than just agreeing with whatever people were saying, especially if I didn't hear them.
Diane's story is an example of how social pressure and lack of access to auditory information impacts understanding. Teachers can provide scaffolding and modeling for social interactions that are planned as well as review when social mistakes happen. The Boys Town Social Skills List can be an effective tool for this. These lists provide information about appropriate social behaviors and skills that need to be taught directly and clearly, which helps students learn age-appropriate social competencies. Another area for social development might include participation in extracurricular activities. Middle school is the age where being involved in activities begins to lead to opportunities for socialization, friendship, and shared experiences. Participation in extracurricular activities also increases leadership opportunities, decision-making, and interpersonal communication. Teachers can have discussions with students about areas of interest and how their hearing may or may not affect participation, and strategies to help them connect in challenging situations. With that information, students can make decisions about what accommodations they might want to make in order to participate in activities.
Listening in the water is very hard sometimes, but luckily I have some amazing and very loud coaches. Swimming is a fall sport, so joining the swim team helped me make friends before school started. One thing that was very hard for me was starting on the blocks because of the start. The start is a very loud sound, and often you switch lanes between races. It takes me a few extra seconds to process the sound and know what to do. Sometimes it leaves me a few seconds behind in my race. We haven't found a solution for this, but that's okay. I'm still very fast. In badminton, it was more easier because it's not in a pool. One thing about badminton is that if you do doubles, you have to communicate. But me and my partner have found a good way of communicating without talking during games. Sometimes we do have to talk during a game in case one of us isn't paying attention or if one of us cannot get the birdie.
Participating in extracurricular activities helped Hannah learn how to make accommodations for her hearing loss in social situations, develop social competencies, and friendships through a shared experience. Another consideration for middle school age students is the connection of deaf or hard of hearing role models. Providing students with a positive adult deaf or hard of hearing role model can empower students by knowing others who have had similar struggles and learning strategies for improving communication or social access in multiple settings. It is imperative that middle school students know that there are others who have gone before them in order to develop a stronger sense of well-being and connectedness. Self-identity questions may start to arise in the middle school years that may not have been noticed in the elementary school.
I loved the role models that I had later in my life who let me know that I could do whatever I wanted. Yes, it would certainly not be easy, but as long as I understood my rights, owned my voice, and stood my ground, I could accomplish anything I set my mind to. And I did. Some days were harder and defeating, and we often don't have the opportunity to share that with others. It's important that students understand that they are not alone. Yes, there is a future that awaits them, and it does not have limitations. We set our own high bar. We reach our own goals. There will be times that we must overcome numerous challenges, but the rewards at the end of succeeding and surviving are amazing.
Encouraging these home-based interventions with extracurricular activity, participation, and access to deaf or hard of hearing role models are effective tools to promote positive self-image and increase social opportunities for students. It is also important to consider the environment that the middle school students are in. Students no longer have just one teacher. Instead, they are traveling from classroom to classroom, trying to navigate many different social situations. Different teachers have different academic, communication, and social expectations. Some teachers expect students to be active participants in the lesson, while others focus their lessons around group work. This can be challenging for students to navigate. They may need different accommodations in different classes in order to be successful classroom participants. It is important that teachers not only talk with students about their classrooms to improve access, but also talk about the changes in peer relationships so that students can have positive social interactions.
Middle school is a time when students have heightened awareness of being different. And when other students or teachers make comments to cause them to stand out from the crowd, this can lead to the development of triggers. With those triggers, parents and teachers may notice more resistance in various situations. It's important to gently probe or ask questions to learn what caused a trigger to develop. Triggers are actions or words that cause embarrassment and/or feelings of shame for students. Often these triggers don't get labeled in that way and are just attributed to the mainstream setting. For example, often teachers aren't prepared and students are asked to watch a video without captions. The teacher may say, "Oh, you can simply watch it later." But this lack of inclusiveness feels embarrassing for the student or shameful during the trials of adolescence. The student may feel as though they are a burden to the teacher or are less important than the other students. A teacher may ask the student, "Can you hear me?" Or, "Is this microphone working?" There are some students who are not embarrassed and go right along with it and even may shout, "Yep, it's working," because of their strong connections with teachers and classmates and/or personality. It's important to remember that students are individuals and to check with them.
I remember a student who had unilateral deafness. From an early age, she was encouraged to be a strong self-advocate, preferring to talk with teachers before or after class if she had questions that needed to be clarified. The teacher of students who are deaf and hard of hearing was involved and supportive. However, when the student was in later middle school years, she did not want other people to know that she could not hear in one ear. She became more sensitive to the fact that she was hard of hearing, and therefore she preferred more discreet ways of getting access with technology so she did not stand out.
Sometimes having access to other students who are deaf and hard of hearing is a much needed connection, which only happens in the summers at camps. It can be useful to connect with students with others who have similar experiences. Students can discuss triggers and how they felt in situations where they were treated differently. If there is another student in the school, then it's important that those students meet each other occasionally. For students who are unable to meet others in school, technology can be empowering because of the connections made across miles. When thinking about the middle school years, it's most important to remember that for each student, it's a unique journey because they are all individuals with different personalities, experiences, possible triggers, family support, and access to teachers who are deaf and hard of hearing as well as other students. Middle school years have many ups and downs and are very important when students are learning social and emotional skills to take care of themselves. IEP goals might focus on friendship levels, how to approach people to have a conversation, as well as recognizing triggers and what to do when feeling uncomfortable in new or repeated situations. Strategies can include role-playing, scripts, watching videos with captions, and seeing other people figure out what to do. It's most important to remember that not having access to others who have shared similar experiences can create isolation. But there are many tools to connect students with each other to help ease the struggle of adolescence and change self-identities. Additional materials and ideas can be found on our resources list linked to this webinar. We hope teachers discover ideas and support social emotional development and skills that are unique to students who are deaf and hard of hearing.